Hello, a very good morning to all. Welcome to the last part of the one act play Monkey's Paw. We have already seen the play, the explanation is already given. But today we are going to see about the author as well as some analysis of the story. First, we are going to see the biography of W. Jacobs. William Weimar Jacobs was born on September 8, 1863 in London, England. An author, humorist and dramatist, Jacobs is best remembered for the enduring classic tale of horror called The Monkey's Paw. So, this author W. Jacobs was born in England, the city of London, and he is a versatile writer, but mostly he is today remembered for his one act play or short story titled The Monkey's Paw. As a youth, Jacobs grew up near the Wapping Docks in London, where his father was a wharf manager. So his house was very close to the harbour, and his father also was working there as a wharf manager. Wharf is actually the dock or near the shipyard. The dockland setting would show up frequently in his later literary output. So since he was living very close to these docklands, throughout his writing you find these settings will come into play. Jacobs the wharf rat and his three siblings lost their mother when they were all still young children. So here wharf rat means he was a frequent visitor to the wharf or the docks. So he used to be living there because his father was also unemployed there. And very sadly they lost their mother when they were very young. Their father, William Gage Jacobs, remarried and fathered a further 7 children with his erstwhile housekeeper Ellen Flory. So his father married again, married their previous housekeeper. Although he grew up surrounded by poverty, Jacobs himself received a formal education in London, first at a private prep school and later at the Birkbeck Literary and Scientific Institute, now part of the University of London and now known as Birkbeck College. So in spite of their poverty, Jacobs was very fortunate to get a very good education at one of the best schools at that time. After attending Birkbeck College, Jacobs entered the civil service in 1879 as a clerk. He was promoted in 1883 to the savings bank section, where he remained until 1899. So he was working in the bank for some time. While serving as a clerk, he began submitting sketches and occasional pieces to magazines. So meanwhile he also started writing and sending his writings to the magazines and all that. His opportunity came when the Strand magazine accepted one of his stories in 1895. So that is the first time a magazine titled The Strand accepted his writing and tried to publish that. 1 year later, his first book, a collection of humorous sea tales entitled Many Cargoes, appeared, and thereafter he was able to issue nearly a book a year until 1914, when his production slowed. So throughout his writing you find his experience in the wharf or dockyard is reflected. So even the title Many Cargoes, it shows his that influence of his residence very close to the harbour. His first novel, A Master of Craft, appeared in 1900. His most famous work, The Monkey's Paw, garnered considerable attention when it first appeared in 1902. So it was in 1902 he wrote the short story The Monkey's Paw, and definitely it became a huge hit. A dramatic adaptation, a one-act play produced a few years later by Louis Napoleon Parker, also was received well. So this one-act play was written only after a few years. Even that was appreciated by the people. Nevertheless, by 1914, Jacobs began to be weary of his creations, much as Arthur Conan Doyle had reacted against his Sherlock Holmes series. So by 1914, you find him slowing down his writing. He was getting tired of writing, just like the author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, had experienced. Jacobs' later books shows signs of strain. That means he was not very fluent in writing anymore. It shows his struggle to write. A slightly built man, pale in complexion and retiring, Jacobs was no literary lion. So, though he was a great writer, he was not just showing off like that. He was a very simple person. Retiring here means not very forward, shy and reserved. That's the meaning of retiring here. He avoided publicity, keeping to a small circle of friends, including the illustrator of many of his books, E.W. Campbell. So he did not have a lot of friends or people from high class society and all that. He tried to keep, secluded, rather isolated from others. The only person who was very close to him was his illustrator and a few of his friends. Though for a time a most successful writer of stories, he never put on airs. Put on airs means to show off. He never tried to do that. He never pretended that he is a great writer. Jacobs died on September 1, 1943. So that is about his biography. Now let us go to the analysis of the story Monkey's Paw. So it was first published in 1902, we have already seen that, and seems to have shown up in one edition or another of just about every anthology of literature ever since. So anthology means collection of stories. So this shows that this Monkey's Paw was very famous, and everyone who published a book, a collection of stories, they used to include this story. That shows it was very well known, it was very popular. One reason for the story's ubiquitous publication history is that it is quite simply a masterpiece of literary economy. So ubiquitous means found everywhere. Sarvavyapi എന്ന് പറയുന്നു മലയാളത്തിൽ. That means everybody wanted to publish his book, and you could find this short story or one-act play in every collection of book stories. And one reason for that is the economy of that writing. That means it was very short. In few pages he was able to create a masterpiece. That's the meaning of masterpiece of literary economy. The story is surprisingly short considering its abundance of characters and incidents. So though there are many characters, but still the story is very, very short. It is the kind of tersely told story that fits in quite nicely among much shorter poems and much longer prose. So you find it is a very short story. Tersely told means told in a very brief manner. Tersely means using few words. So it's almost like shorter poems and long prose. Even readers who have never actually read the story composed by Jacobs are likely to be familiar with its macabre content. So, even people who have not read this story, they are aware of the content of that content of horror in that story. Macabre means horror or frightening. There comes to a righteously ironic ending, since the monkey's paw is not only widely anthologized but also often parodied. So here righteously ironic ending means righteously means like something that is done as a part of justice. Now, what is the justice carried out here? It only shows that they became very ambitious or even greedy once they knew that this monkey's paw had magical powers. So they wanted to become rather rich. Though they were quite happy, still they wished to have more money. So they had to face their consequence, tragic end. That is the ironic ending here. That means though they try to have more money, the person who maybe even suggested that is their son Herbert, you find he is ending up very sadly. He comes to a kind of tragic end. That's the meaning of ironic ending here. It is parodied means you know what is parody. It is imitated by many other writers. The content. One example is The Simpsons. I think many of you know. It's a cartoon, American cartoon TV series, and you have a Halloween episode. Halloween means actually a kind of festival, usually celebrated in Europe and all that, where they think of the ghost and spirits and all that. So they think that during the Halloween day, all these spirits and ghosts will come out. So people wear dress and even mask with weird pictures and all that. So that is actually Halloween. Here Halloween episode means in this particular cartoon there is one episode titled The Tree House of Horror. So actually that story is based on the theme of monkey's paw. The story is certainly more about the plot and its message rather than the characters. For the whites are rather thinly drawn. So here in this story, the characters are not given much importance. You don't find a kind of in-depth characterization there. They are very thinly drawn. There is the family of the whites. Herbert is a picture of youthful ignorance. Mrs. White is a grieving mother, and Mr. White is a weary and wise older gentleman. So we don't know much about these characters because that is not necessary here, because he only wanted to convey a kind of message. So the plot was more important than the characters. Their lack of depth is purposeful, however. It allows the reader to put themselves in the character's shoes and see that it is not their profound character failings but rather the simple and understandable element of human greed that brings about the whites' deleterious circumstances. So the author purposefully did not portray these characters with different dimensions and all that, or even depth. Depth is lacking, because he wanted the readers to experience what the characters were experiencing, and the failings of the characters are mainly because of their greed that is found in everybody. Deleterious means harmful. So it is their greed that brings about the tragic end. Jacobs demonstrates a familiarity with folk tales and classics of world literature, modeling the events of the story of those in the Arabian Nights, as Mrs. White remarks. So, when Mr. Morris is talking about the monkey's paw, immediately you find Mrs. White is remarking about Arabian Nights. That's because those who have read Arabian Nights, we know it's all full of magic and all that. Aladdin and his magic lamp is there in that. So that magic lamp has powers. So whatever you say, you tell the magic lamp, it will be fulfilled. So this magic paw, this monkey's paw is something similar to that. The lamp of Aladdin's lamp in Arabian Nights. The traveler from a distant land, tales of the exotic and eerie, Indian holy men and magical talismans are perfect hallmarks of these genres. So here you find a lot of elements of folk tales coming in here, where he is mentioning about the traveler from a distant land. There is Mr. Morris is coming from there, from India, and he is talking about strange people, the sannyasis or holy men, and talisman. Talisman is actually a kind of something that people carry about for bringing luck and all that. That is talisman. So this gives the story set in an era of industrialism and imperialism and an aura of mystery. So though this story is taking place in the time of in the period of industrialism and imperialism, it gives a kind of mystery towards the whole thing. This elements that are brought in, especially by Mr. Morris, who is talking about the strange land of India, Indian sannyasis and all that. It gives an aura of mystery. Aura means atmosphere. Along with the juxtaposition of the modern, as seen in the factory in which Herbert works, and the primitive, the paw, the story derives its power from its ambiguity and hazy depiction of the tale. So here you find he is placing the modern along with the primitive. Modern means because at that time, industrialization was the going on thing there, and then they are also talking about the primitive monkey's paw. So both are placed close by, the modern and the primitive. And the power of the story is actually coming from its ambiguity. Ambiguity means a sentence or word that can be interpreted in various ways. And hazy depiction of the tale. Hazy means vague, not clear. So the story doesn't give clarity many times. Many things are left to the imagination of the reader. So that's the meaning of ambiguity here, and also hazy depiction, where we don't know exactly what is happening, especially the money that is given to them, the 200 pounds. We don't know whether it was really a kind of coincidence or it is because of the power of the monkey's paw. We don't know. Much of the heavy lifting is actually done by the reader, as they imagine within their minds the ghoulishness of Herbert's mangled body standing before the door of the house, banging frantically to get in. So here heavy lifting means the hard work. Much of the hard work is actually done by the reader. That means it is left to the imagination what is happening, especially when you find the last scene where you hear the knock on the door, and Mrs. White imagines that it could be or it is their son, but actually we don't know. We only have to imagine that, and we can imagine the horrible body, the bruised and ruin, almost like mangled here means chatanyaranya, mutilated body of Herbert standing in front of that door and knocking. That we have to imagine, because nothing is mentioned there. The author doesn't depict or portray at all. That means it is left to the imagination of the reader to imagine that, how he is coming out of that grave and standing like that. So that is really kind of horror. That is the meaning of ghoulishness, the horror of that scene. Trying to get inside frantically, excitedly, in a hurry. And of course, the question must be asked, is the visitor really Herbert? Again, we don't know. It is left to the imagination, because nothing is told at the end whether it was really Herbert or just their imagination. Much, if not all, of what happens to the whites can be seen as coincidence. So things must have happened by chance, not because of the power of that monkey's paw. So still we don't know the real fact. It is simply left to the imagination of the reader. Mr. White could have imagined the paw moved. After all, the mind, when stimulated, can play wondrous tricks. So we don't know exactly what Mr. White felt in his hand, whether actually the monkey's paw moved or not, we don't know. But he says he felt like that. Maybe the mind could have played a kind of trick like that, and he felt like that. Herbert could have been killed due to an error of his own, or merely a fluke of the machine. Again, that could have been kind of coincidence, not because of the power of the monkey's paw. It was a kind of accident that happened in the factory. The 200 pounds may simply have been what the firm chose to offer, independent of any trick of fate. So, but at the end we are forced to think that this monkey's paw really had a kind of power, and that is the power of Jacobs, his power of writing. So we are forced to believe what he doesn't say, what he doesn't really force upon us, because things happen like that, and we try to connect the cause and effect, even though there is not enough evidence to prove that. The knocking at the door could have been the wind, a person playing a trick, or even the wild imaginings of grieving parents, we don't know. So it could be anything. It is this ambiguity that elevates the tale above merely a spooky story. So it is this element of lack of clarity, ambiguity. Anything could have happened there. That is left to the imagination of the reader. So it is elevating the story from a real, rather spooky story to a real classic. Spooky means scary. Expressing similar views, critic Grav Koja notes that the story is effective not only for what Jacobs does, but for what he refrains from doing. So the story is effective not because what the storyteller is telling us, but what he is not telling. That means he says something, maybe half. The rest of the things he doesn't say. That's the meaning of what he refrains from doing, what he doesn't do. A master of economical, unobtrusive prose, he sets a cozy scene, a chess game in front of a fire, a cold and windy night outside, in just a few strokes. So here you find, at the opening of the story, you find the Whites, Mr. White and Herbert are playing a chess. There's a cozy scene where they are really enjoying, they are very comfortable in their home, but there's a contrasting scene outside the house, that is where it is chilly, very cold and raining, windy and all that. So It's a kind of contrasting. So that shows the genius of Jacobs. Only later does one realize how closely the rest of the story recapitulates the elements of this first brief scene, as the whites make their moves in a fateful and fatal game, while the forces of darkness swirl just beyond the comfortable circle of their lives. So Jacobs is setting the tone of the story in the very beginning itself, where he shows the father and son playing chess. So the chess itself symbolizes chance or luck. And outside there are a lot of dark forces working. So the rain, the cold and all that symbolizes the evil forces that is working outside, which is trying to get into their life actually. Koger also loads the story's gently humorous touches, which are alongside macabre examples of what since has come to be known as black humor. So here you find kind of black humor is working inside this story. For example, you take the example of a son, Herbert, where he is making fun of his father, and he is the one who is giving him idea to wish for 200 pounds. At the end, he is, sadly coming to a kind of end, gruesome end. So that is the black humor you find in this story. The danger of wishing. The whites' downfall comes as the result of wishing for more than what they actually needed. Even though Mr. White feels content with his life, he has a happy family, a comfortable home and plenty of love, he nevertheless uses the monkey's paw to wish for money that he doesn't really need. So this is the danger of wishing. That means the story only tells us that you should not wish for what you don't deserve. So if you wish for what you don't need or what you don't deserve, the consequence will be far reaching and it will be very dangerous. That's what he is trying to tell us. As Jacob suggests, making one seemingly harmless wish only intensifies and magnifies desire as each subsequent wish becomes more outlandish. So once one of their wishes comes true, they are wishing for more. So that is the nature of human greed. When you get something, you want more. After receiving 200 pounds for Herbert's death, for example, Mrs. White jumps to the conclusion that the poor has unlimited power. So even after the death of their son, the mother maybe strongly believes in the power of the monkey's paw. That's why he is wishing for the second one, to bring his son back to life. She forces Mr. White to wish to bring Herbert back to life, a wish far more serious than their first. So the mother actually doesn't think about the consequence. What could have happened if he had come back to life in that terrible shape? Unchecked greed, therefore, only leads to unhappiness, no matter how much more one asks for. So uncontrolled greed can bring you to grief. That's the meaning. Intense desire also often leads to unfulfilled expectations or unintended consequences, as with Herbert's unexpected death and rise from the grave as a living corpse. So when you are bent on fulfilling your dreams or your desire, it can have unexpected or very unhappy consequences. That's what is shown in this story. So when they wished for 200 pounds, it resulted in the death of the son. And in the second wish, they are trying to bring back the dead son. And he may be coming back as a kind of living corpse, like a zombie. Put simply, Jacobs is reminding readers to be careful what they wish for, because it may just come true. Yes. So it's not that your wishes will come true, but it will also have very unforeseen consequences in your life. So with that, we come to the end of this monkey's paw. Thank you and have a great day.